I am Morgan, 32 years old, and 3 days ago, I stood completely alone at Cameron's memorial service while our entire architecture firm celebrated at the Metropolitan Museum. The rain fell steadily that afternoon, matching the weight in my chest as I watched them lower my spouse into the ground. Not a single colleague attended, not Alex, my co-founder, who once called Cameron family, not the board members who praised Cameron's visionary designs, not even the junior architects whose careers Cameron had nurtured from nothing. What they didn't know was that Cameron had left me something far more powerful than grief. Hidden in our home safe was complete ownership of every blueprint they were about to sell for $47 million. Cameron and I met 12 years ago at a green building conference in Portland. The fire alarm went off during my presentation prep, and Cameron literally crashed into me in the stairwell, sending my laptop and 3 months of research flying down 2 flights of stairs. Instead of apologizing and rushing off like everyone else evacuating, Cameron insisted on helping recover my damaged files, spending 6 hours in the hotel business center reconstructing my presentation. That impromptu partnership became the foundation of Evergreen Design Collective and a marriage that redefined everything I thought I knew about love. The contrast between our backgrounds should have made us incompatible. Cameron came from Connecticut, old money. The Hayes family had Yale legacy status, going back 4 generations, country club memberships that cost more than my parents' annual income, and vacation homes in the Hamptons. I grew up in Detroit, where my father worked assembly lines at Ford until his back gave out, and my mother cleaned office buildings at night so I could focus on studying. I made it to MIT on full scholarships and determination, but to Cameron's family, I would always be the opportunist from the wrong side of the tracks. You could have partnered with established firms, Cameron's mother Elizabeth would say at family dinners, her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around crystal stemware. The Hutchinson Group has been asking for years. Why stake your entire future on someone with no connections, no family backing? Cameron would squeeze my hand under the mahogany table. Because Morgan sees buildings as living things that serve communities, not just profit margins. That vision is worth more than all the connections in Connecticut. But Elizabeth's disapproval never softened. At our wedding, she spent most of the reception at the bar, occasionally glancing at my family's table with barely concealed disdain. When my mother tried to introduce herself, Elizabeth smiled tightly and said, "How nice that Morgan's people could make the trip," before walking away. The firm we built together challenged everything the industry held sacred. While competitors designed glass towers that maximized square footage and rental income, we created sustainable spaces that breathed with their communities. Our first major project, a affordable housing complex in Oakland, won 3 international awards. The press called it revolutionary. Alex Chen, who joined us as a third partner in year 2, called it naively idealistic. "You're leaving money on the table," Alex would argue during board meetings. "We could triple our profits if we loosened the sustainability requirements just 15%. Then we'd be every other firm in Manhattan." Cameron would respond calmly, "Our integrity is our brand." I believed in that integrity. Even when the diagnosis came 6 months ago, even when Cameron's hands began trembling during client presentations, even when the words started slurring during board meetings. "Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis," the doctors said. ALS. 2 to 5 years if we were lucky. 6 months if we weren't. We weren't lucky. The night after the diagnosis, I called Alex immediately. Cameron was still at the hospital for more tests, and I sat in our empty apartment staring at medical pamphlets about end-of-life care. "Alex, Cameron's been diagnosed with ALS. It's terminal." There was a pause. Then, "That's unfortunate timing. We're in the middle of the Tokyo presentation. Can Cameron review designs from home?" "Alex, did you hear me? Cameron is dying." "I heard you, Morgan. But the Japanese investors won't wait. We need those blueprints by Monday." "Perhaps Cameron can work reduced hours." I hung up my hands, shaking with rage. The firm we'd built on human-centered design suddenly had no humanity for its own founder. As Cameron's condition deteriorated, I took on more responsibility. I managed client meetings, supervised construction sites, and refined designs, all while spending nights at the hospital holding Cameron's increasingly frail hand. Our employees sent flowers once. The board sent a card. Alex sent nothing. During those final weeks, I discovered something that would change everything. Cameron had been working on private designs registered independently, never submitted through the firm. Hundreds of blueprints for schools, hospitals, community centers, all marked with copyright notices in Cameron's name alone. The firm had usage rights for active projects, but Cameron retained all intellectual property. It was a safeguard we'd built into our partnership agreement years ago, never imagining we'd need it. 3 weeks before Cameron died, I paid the office rent from our personal savings, $280,000. The firm's accounts were mysteriously frozen, something about restructuring that Alex handled. I didn't question it then. Cameron needed me more than the business did. But Cameron saw what I couldn't. That's why, with trembling hands that could barely hold a pen, my spouse wrote a note and sealed it in an envelope. Only open if they betray you. The morning of Cameron's memorial service arrived gray and bitter, matching the hollow ache in my chest. I dressed carefully in the charcoal suit Cameron had loved, the one we'd bought together for our first major client presentation. My hands shook as I adjusted the collar, remembering how Cameron would always straighten my tie with a gentle smile, whispering, "You've got this, Morgan." But I didn't have this. Not alone. The funeral home on Madison Avenue was nearly empty when I arrived. Cameron's parents sat in the front row, maintaining their perfect posture even in grief. Elizabeth didn't acknowledge me when I sat down beside them. Cameron's father, Richard, gave me a brief nod, nothing more. Behind us, Cameron's elderly aunt from Boston, 2 cousins who barely knew us, and surprisingly my own parents, who had driven 16 hours from Detroit, despite my insistence they didn't need to come. "Where is everyone?" my mother whispered, looking around the sparse room. Cameron knew hundreds of people. "They're at the Metropolitan Museum," I replied flatly. "There's an investor gala for the Tokyo project." My mother's face hardened. "On the day of the funeral, it was scheduled months ago," I said, though the words tasted like ash. "Alex said they couldn't reschedule. 300 confirmed guests, including the Japanese delegation." What I didn't tell her was that I had received 47 missed calls that morning. Not condolences, but frantic messages about missing blueprints, about presentations that needed Cameron's final touches, about contracts requiring founder signatures. Even in death, they wanted to extract value from Cameron's genius. The service was brief. The minister spoke about legacy and love, about lives that touch others and leave the world better. I wanted to scream that Cameron's legacy was being auctioned off 20 blocks away to the highest bidder, but I held my tongue. When it came time for eulogies, I stood on unsteady legs and spoke about the person who had taught me that buildings could breathe, that architecture was about serving humanity, not just housing it. Cameron believed that every structure we create should make someone's life better, I said, my voice cracking. Not richer, not more efficient, but genuinely better. That's the revolution Cameron started, and it will continue long after today. Elizabeth scoffed quietly. Richard shifted uncomfortably. They had never understood their child's vision, had never grasped why Cameron walked away from the family's investment firm to build something meaningful with someone like me. After the service, as we stood by the grave, my phone buzzed insistently. I ignored it until the final shovel of dirt fell. Then, unable to resist any longer, I looked at the screen. A message from our estate attorney, James Rothstein, urgent. Must speak immediately. Legal situation regarding firm ownership. I excused myself and called him from my car, rain drumming against the windshield. "Morgan, I've just reviewed Cameron's updated will from 2 weeks ago," James said without preamble. "Did you know about the intellectual property clause?" What clause? Cameron registered every single design created in the past 3 years as personal intellectual property, not firm property. The company only had usage rights while Cameron was alive. Technically, the firm is now using stolen property for the Tokyo presentation. My heart stopped. "Are you certain?" I have the copyright certificates right here. Over 300 designs, including the entire sustainable city blueprint they're presenting today. Cameron also left me this. I heard paper rustling. A sealed envelope addressed to you. The outside says, "Only open if they betray you." I have the same envelope, I said quietly. Cameron left it in our safe. Then you should open it. Because what I'm seeing in the firm's recent SEC filings suggests betrayal is exactly what's happening. They filed paperwork to sell the company to Fortress Development 3 days ago while Cameron was dying. Fortress Development. The very company we'd spent 5 years fighting against, blocking their environmentally destructive projects, testifying against their permits. They represented everything we stood against. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. In our apartment, I went straight to the safe and pulled out Cameron's envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and a USB drive. "My dearest Morgan," the note began. "If you're reading this, then they've shown their true colors. I've suspected for months that Alex has been negotiating behind our backs. The attached drive contains recordings from the conference room emails Alex thought were deleted and proof of what they're planning. The firm was never about the mission for them. It was always about the payday. But here's what they don't know: every design I've created is mine alone, legally protected. The Tokyo investors have been working with me directly, not through the firm. They want the sustainable city project, but only with someone who shares the vision. That's you, my love. The blueprints are your inheritance. Use them to build something better. All my love, Cameron. I plugged in the USB drive with trembling fingers. The first file was a video dated 1 week before Cameron's death. The conference room camera showed Alex, the entire board, and several people I recognized as Fortress executives, champagne glasses raised. To Cameron's timely illness, Alex said, smiling broadly, "Who knew ALS would solve our buyout problem?" The room erupted in laughter. Morgan always was too emotional for business, board member Patricia Chen added. "Still thinks we're running a charity instead of a company." The best part, Alex continued, is using Cameron's own designs for the Fortress deal. Morgan's too grief-stricken to notice we've already filed the patents under the company name. By the time the estate is settled, we'll have sold everything for $47 million. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. At that exact moment, I had been holding Cameron's hand in the hospice, listening to labored breathing, whispering our favorite poems, promising that everything would be okay. The next file was an email chain dating back 6 months, right when Cameron got diagnosed. Alex had been negotiating with Fortress since that very day, using Cameron's illness as leverage to fast-track the sale. The co-founder's deteriorating condition provides perfect timing for restructuring, Alex had written. Morgan will be too distracted with caregiving to notice the ownership transfers. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I watched the rest of the files. There were dozens of recordings, each more damning than the last. Alex joking about changing the locks once I was too distraught to function. Patricia Chen calculating how quickly they could liquidate Cameron's designs. Board members discussing whether to wait until after the funeral to announce the sale, ultimately deciding the gala timing was poetically efficient. But the worst revelation came in an email dated 3 weeks ago when Cameron was barely conscious. Alex had written to Fortress's CEO, "We need both founders' signatures for the sale. Cameron is no longer capable of signing. We're exploring power of attorney options, but if that fails, we have a forensic document specialist who can help resolve the signature issue." They were planning to forge Cameron's signature on the sale documents. I sat in our empty apartment surrounded by Cameron's architectural books, the walls covered with framed blueprints of our proudest projects, and I felt something shift inside me. The grief didn't disappear, but it crystallized into something harder, sharper. They hadn't just betrayed Cameron, they had celebrated Cameron's suffering. They had toasted to the disease that stole my spouse's brilliant mind piece by piece. I called James Rothstein back. "I need you to prepare cease and desist orders immediately. And I need to know exactly what my legal position island I've already started," he said. "According to the partnership agreement, you and Cameron signed, all intellectual property created independently remains with the creator." Cameron was meticulous about filing separate copyrights. Every major design from the past 3 years belongs to Cameron's estate, which means it belongs to you. What about the Tokyo project? That's where it gets interesting. I found correspondence between Cameron and the Japanese investors. They've been dealing directly with Cameron, not through the firm. They want the sustainable city blueprint, but look at this clause. Implementation must be overseen by a principal architect who shares the original vision of community-first development. They even have emails from Cameron specifically recommending you as the only architect capable of maintaining the integrity of the design. So the $47 million deal Alex is celebrating is built entirely on intellectual property he doesn't own, with investors who won't work with him anyway. He just doesn't know it yet. I looked at the time. The gala would be in full swing now. 300 guests admiring blueprints that weren't Alex's to show toasting to a future built on theft and betrayal. "James, can you meet me at the Metropolitan Museum in an hour?" "Morgan, what are you planning?" It's time they learned what Cameron taught me: integrity is our brand. I changed out of my funeral clothes and into my best suit, the navy one Cameron had given me for our anniversary. I gathered the copyright certificates, the USB drive, and my laptop. Before leaving, I stopped at Cameron's desk, running my fingers over the worn wooden surface where so many brilliant designs had been born. "You always saw this coming, didn't you?" I whispered to the empty room. You prepared for their betrayal while I was still believing in their humanity. The rain had intensified by the time I reached the museum. Through the glass pavilion walls, I could see the celebration in full swing. Alex stood at the podium gesturing grandly at a projection of Cameron's sustainable city design. The investors clustered around scale models of buildings Cameron had dreamed into existence during sleepless nights. Patricia Chen laughed with Fortress executives near the bar, probably calculating her share of the sale. I stood in the rain for a moment watching them celebrate on the day we buried Cameron. My phone buzzed with another message, this one from an unknown number. I opened it to find a video file. The message read, "Thought you should see this. Cameron was my mentor. I'm sorry I couldn't attend the service. Alex threatened to fire anyone who went." It was security footage from inside the gala recorded just minutes ago. The audio was crystal clear as Alex raised his champagne glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight marks a new chapter for architectural innovation. While we mourn our recently departed colleague, we celebrate that their vision will live on through our merger with Fortress Development." Someone in the crowd called out, "Where's Morgan? Shouldn't the other founder be here?" Alex's smile tightened. "Morgan is processing the loss. Sometimes personal weakness prevents professional participation. That's why it's crucial to have partners who can maintain business continuity despite emotional disruptions." The crowd murmured sympathetically. Several people nodded. They were buying his performance completely. I forwarded the video to James with a simple message, "Add defamation to the list." Then I walked into the museum. The security guard recognized me and nodded me through. I walked through the marble halls, my footsteps echoing until I reached the pavilion entrance. Through the doors, I could hear Alex still speaking, still selling Cameron's dreams to the highest bidder. I pushed open the doors. The room didn't fall silent immediately. It was a gradual wave as people noticed me, nudged their neighbors, pointed at the widow who should have been home grieving. Alex saw me last, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm as I walked directly toward the podium. "Morgan," he said into the microphone, his voice artificially warm. "We weren't expecting you. Perhaps you should. Perhaps I should address our investors," I said, my voice carrying even without the microphone. "Since they're about to purchase $47 million worth of stolen property," the murmur that ran through the crowd was no longer sympathetic. Several Fortress executives straightened, their expressions sharpening. The Japanese delegation exchanged glances. Alex tried to laugh. "Morgan is understandably emotional." "Security, please help." "Security can wait," I said, pulling out my laptop. "Mr. Takeda, Miss Yamamoto," I addressed the lead Japanese investors directly. "Did Alex mention that Cameron personally registered every design being presented tonight, that the firm only had usage rights while Cameron was alive?" The Japanese investors stood up slowly, their faces grave. Mr. Takeda spoke first, his English precise and cutting. "Mr. Chen, are you saying you don't own the rights to these designs?" Alex's face flushed. Morgan is confused, grieving. "The firm owns all work product created by partners. Not according to our partnership agreement," I interrupted, pulling out the documents James had prepared. Section 12, Paragraph 4. Individual partners retain copyright to designs created outside official firm projects. Cameron filed 312 separate copyrights over the past 3 years. Here are the certificates. I connected my laptop to the presentation system, overriding Alex's slides. The screen filled with copyright documentation, each one bearing Cameron's name and the official seal of the U.S. Copyright Office. "This is ridiculous." Patricia Chen stood up, her voice shrill. "Even if that's true, Cameron is gone. The estate will naturally." "The estate passes to me," I said calmly, "along with all intellectual property. But there's more you should know." I clicked to the next file. This is an email from Alex to Fortress Development dated 6 months ago, the day Cameron was diagnosed with ALS. I let the email display on the massive screen behind me. The room fell completely silent as 300 people read Alex's words about Cameron's timely illness and how it provided perfect timing for restructuring. "That's taken out of context," Alex stammered, reaching for the laptop. "Then, let's provide context," I said, sidestepping him. "Here's the video from last week's board meeting." The conference room recording played on the screen. Alex's voice filled the pavilion. "To Cameron's timely illness. Who knew ALS would solve our buyout problem?" The sound of clinking glasses and laughter echoed through the space. Several investors walked out immediately. Others pulled out their phones, likely calling their legal teams. The Fortress executives huddled together, their faces pale. But I wasn't finished. Mr. Takeda, you should know that Cameron has been corresponding with your team directly for the past 4 months. I pulled up the email chain. Cameron specifically stated that the Sustainable City project should only proceed with an architect committed to community-first development. In the last email sent 2 weeks before Cameron died, you agreed that I was the only architect Cameron trusted to maintain the design's integrity. Mr. Takeda nodded slowly. This is correct. We have been working with Cameron-san directly. Mr. Chen told us this was approved by all partners, but we insisted on Cameron's involvement. The contract specifies that without Cameron or Cameron's designated successor, we cannot proceed. This is a setup, Alex shouted, his composure finally cracking. Morgan and Cameron planned this. We planned nothing. I said quietly, but my voice carried across the room. Cameron is dead, Alex. Dead. While you were toasting champagne and celebrating the opportunity that disease created, I was holding my spouse's hand in a hospice room. While you were filing paperwork to steal a life's work, I was picking out cemetery plots. Cameron's only plan was to protect the integrity of designs meant to help communities, not line your pockets. Patricia Chen tried one more time. The firm has a legal claim to all work product. We'll sue, if necessary. James Rothstein chose that moment to enter, flanked by 2 other attorneys. I wouldn't recommend that, Miss Chen. We've already filed injunctions against any use of Cameron Hayes' copyrighted materials. We've also notified the New York Attorney General's office about the attempted document fraud mentioned in your emails. What fraud? Patricia's voice cracked. James pulled out another document. The email where Mr. Chen discusses hiring a forensic document specialist to resolve the signature issue after Cameron became unable to sign. Conspiracy to commit forgery is a felony in New York State. The exodus began in earnest then. Investors, clients, and partners streamed toward the exits. The Fortress executives were on their phones, likely with their own lawyers. Alex stood at the podium watching his $47 million deal evaporate. You're destroying everything we built, he said to me, his voice hollow. No, I replied. I'm saving what Cameron and I built from becoming everything we fought against. You never understood that the vision was more important than the profit. You never grasped that architecture should serve humanity, not exploit it. Miss Yamamoto from the Japanese delegation approached me. Miss Morgan, we would like to discuss the Sustainable City project with you directly. Cameron-san spoke highly of your commitment to the original vision. Would you consider taking the lead on implementation? I would be honored, I said, maintaining eye contact with Alex. But not through this firm. I'll be establishing the Cameron Hayes Foundation for Sustainable Architecture. Our focus will be on affordable, environmentally conscious design for underserved communities. We would be interested in funding such a foundation, Mr. Takeda added. Cameron-san's vision aligns with our values. The investment we discussed was $85 million. This offer stands, but only with your leadership. Alex laughed bitterly. You have no firm, no staff, no infrastructure. You'll fail within a year. Actually, a young voice spoke up from the crowd. Morgan will have staff. I turned to see David Liu, one of our junior architects, standing with about 15 other employees. We've been discussing this since Cameron got sick. If Morgan starts a new firm, we're going with her. We joined this company for the vision Cameron promoted, not for whatever this has become. One by one, more employees stood up. By the time they finished, more than half the firm's architects and designers had declared their intention to leave. This is conspiracy, Alex sputtered. Corporate theft. I'll sue every one of you. With what money? James asked mildly. The firm's accounts are about to be frozen pending investigation of fraud. Your personal assets will be tied up in legal fees. And Mr. Chen, you should know that the New York State Architecture Board has been notified about your ethical violations. Your license is under review. The gala ended in chaos. Within an hour, the pavilion that had been filled with celebrations stood nearly empty, littered with abandoned champagne glasses and forgotten business cards. Alex sat alone at a table, his head in his hands. Patricia Chen was on her phone with her lawyer, pacing frantically. The Fortress executives had disappeared without a word. I stood by the windows looking out at the rain-soaked city, feeling Cameron's presence in the quiet aftermath. David Liu approached with a tablet in hand. Morgan, I've been documenting everything Alex and the board have done for the past 6 months. Hidden meetings, altered documents, redirected funds. Cameron asked me to keep records, said you might need them someday. Cameron asked you, David nodded. About 3 months ago, when the symptoms got worse. Cameron called me into the office and said, If something happens to me, make sure Morgan knows the truth. I have everything backed up in multiple locations. I took the tablet scrolling through meeting minutes, financial records, email chains. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. They had been siphoning money from sustainable projects to fund luxury office renovations. They had rejected community housing proposals to pursue high-margin commercial developments. Every principle Cameron and I had established had been systematically dismantled. Thank you, David. This will help with the legal proceedings. There's more, he said quietly. The staff wants to meet tomorrow. Not everyone can afford to leave without another job lined up, but they want to know your plans. If you're really starting the Cameron Hayes Foundation, we want to be part of it. James Rothstein joined us, his expression satisfied. The injunction has been filed. As of this moment, the firm cannot use any of Cameron's designs. I've also frozen the Fortress deal pending investigation. Alex won't be selling anything to anyone. What about the employees, I asked. They shouldn't suffer because of Alex's actions. I've arranged for an emergency fund from Cameron's estate to cover 3 months of salaries for any employee who transitions to your foundation. Cameron apparently set aside $2 million specifically for this possibility. $2 million. Even facing death, Cameron had been protecting the people who believed in our vision. Mr. Takeda and Miss Yamamoto approached before leaving. Miss Morgan, we are deeply sorry for your loss. Cameron-san was a visionary. We would be honored to help carry on that vision through your foundation. Our board meets next week, Miss Yamamoto added. We will propose full funding for the Sustainable City project with you as lead architect. The figure we discussed with Cameron was $85 million over 5 years. This tragedy should not stop the future Cameron imagined. After they left, I sat alone in the empty pavilion. 3 weeks ago, I had been focused only on Cameron's declining health, measuring life in breaths and heartbeats. Now I was being asked to rebuild everything we had created, but without the person who had made it all worthwhile. My phone rang. It was my mother. Morgan, honey, are you all right? Your father and I saw some posts online about a confrontation at the museum. I'm okay, Mom. Just tired. Do you want us to stay a few more days? We can help with anything you need. For the first time in days, I felt tears threatening. Actually, yes, I'd like that. The next morning, I met with 23 employees at a coffee shop near our old office. They were the core team, the ones who had joined the firm for its mission rather than its profit potential. Sarah Martinez, our lead environmental designer, spoke first. Morgan, we all knew something was wrong when Cameron got sick and Alex started changing things. The sustainable housing project in Brooklyn canceled. The community center in the Bronx redesigned as luxury condos. We've watched everything you and Cameron built being dismantled piece by piece. Why didn't anyone say anything, I asked. We tried, David said. But Alex threatened termination for anyone who undermined leadership during a transition period. Most of us have families, mortgages, student loans. We couldn't afford to lose our jobs. I understand, I said, and I did. Here's what I can offer. The Cameron Hayes Foundation will focus exclusively on sustainable, affordable architecture. The pay might be less, initially, but you'll own part of every project you help create. Profit sharing, full benefits, and the knowledge that your work is improving communities, not exploiting them. When do we start? Sarah asked without hesitation. Within a month, the Cameron Hayes Foundation was officially established. We found office space in a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, far from Manhattan's glass towers, but close to the communities we wanted to serve. The walls were exposed brick, the desks were secondhand, but the energy was electric. The Sustainable City project for Tokyo moved forward with remarkable speed. The investors increased their commitment to $100 million when they saw our community-first approach. The design Cameron had created wasn't just about green buildings. It was about creating spaces where different economic classes could coexist, where public transportation was prioritized over private vehicles, where every child had access to parks and every elderly person had accessible housing. Alex's firm collapsed within 3 months. The fraud investigation revealed years of financial manipulation. His architecture license was suspended for 5 years. Patricia Chen was disbarred from practicing corporate law. Several board members faced criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud. I received one final communication from Alex, a handwritten letter delivered to the foundation office. Morgan, I know you won't forgive me, and I'm not asking for forgiveness. But you should know that I never understood what you and Cameron were building until it was gone. I was so focused on the money that I missed the meaning. Cameron was right about you. You were always the stronger one. Alex, I filed the letter away without responding. Some bridges once burned should remain ash. 2 years have passed since that confrontation at the museum. 2 years since I stood in the rain watching them celebrate while Cameron's body grew cold. This morning I stood in the same museum pavilion, but everything had changed. The space was filled with community leaders, young architects, environmental activists, and families who lived in buildings the Cameron Hayes Foundation had created. The contrast was profound. No champagne flutes or designer gowns. Instead, children's laughter echoed through the space as they played around models of their new schools. Elderly residents from our affordable housing projects shared stories with architecture students. The walls displayed not luxury towers but community centers, health clinics, and sustainable homes that real people could actually afford. My mother sat in the front row, her weathered hands folded over a program that read Cameron Hayes Memorial Lecture Series, Architecture as Service. She had become the foundation's unofficial grandmother, bringing homemade cookies to every meeting and reminding our young architects to eat proper meals. My father, his back still aching from decades of factory work, had found new purpose managing our community tool library, teaching residents basic home repairs. 2 years ago, I began my speech looking out at faces that understood our mission. We lost a visionary. Cameron Hayes believed that architecture wasn't about building monuments to wealth, but about creating spaces where humanity could flourish. Today, that vision lives in 12 countries, 43 communities, and 30,000 homes. The numbers still amazed me. The Tokyo Sustainable City Project had become a model replicated across Asia. The profit-sharing structure meant every employee owned part of our success. Sarah Martinez, who had taken that leap of faith in the coffee shop, now led our environmental division and had just won an International Design Award. David Liu approached the podium next holding an iPad. Before we continue, Morgan, there's something you should see. The screen showed a live feed from our latest project's groundbreaking ceremony in Lagos, Nigeria. Hundreds of families were gathered to watch the first foundation being poured for an affordable housing complex that would house 5,000 people. They wanted to thank you personally, David said, and the crowd in Lagos erupted in cheers, holding up signs that read Cameron's vision lives in multiple languages. I had to pause, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what we had built from the ashes of Betrayal. After the presentation, as people mingled and shared stories, an unexpected visitor appeared. Jessica Palmer, one of the junior architects from the old firm who had initially stayed with Alex. She looked nervous, uncertain. Morgan, I know I have no right to be here, she began. I was one of the cowards who stayed silent when Alex was destroying everything. But I wanted you to know that I've spent the past year working with at-risk youth, teaching them basic architecture skills. It's my way of trying to make amends. Why didn't you speak up then? I asked, not unkindly. Fear, she said simply. I had just adopted my sister's children after she died. I couldn't risk losing my income. But watching you rebuild, seeing what real courage looks like, it changed something in me. I found other ways to fight. I've been sending documentation about Alex's other fraudulent activities to the authorities. He's facing additional charges now. I nodded slowly. We all make choices based on our circumstances. What matters is what we do next. That evening, I returned to our apartment, the same one Cameron and I had shared. I had considered moving, but realized this space held too much love to abandon. Cameron's desk still sat by the window, now covered with new blueprints and community proposals. Above it hung Cameron's portrait next to the framed note that had changed everything. Only open if they betray you. I opened my laptop to find an email from Mr. Takeda. The Japanese investors were proposing a new project, a global network of sustainable cities, each designed with local communities, respecting cultural differences while maintaining environmental standards. The proposed budget was $500 million over 10 years. This is Cameron San's true legacy, Mr. Takeda wrote. Not just buildings, but a movement. We want the Cameron Hayes Foundation to lead this transformation. As I read through the proposal, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It contained a single photo: Alex standing outside our Brooklyn office holding what looked like a job application. The message read, "He's been standing there for an hour. Says he wants to volunteer, no pay, just wants to learn what he missed. Your call." I looked at the photo for a long moment. The Alex I saw wasn't the confident corporate predator from 2 years ago. He looked older, humbled, carrying the weight of his choices. Part of me wanted to send him away to let him taste the isolation he had forced on us. But Cameron's voice seemed to whisper in my mind. Buildings can be rebuilt, but people rarely get the chance. I texted David, tell him he can volunteer in our community education program. Minimum wage, no authority, direct report to Sarah. If he can handle teaching free design classes in underserved neighborhoods for a year, we'll reconsider. The response was immediate. He accepted before I finished the sentence. Perhaps redemption was possible even for those who had celebrated at funerals and toasted to illness. Cameron would have believed in second chances, in the possibility that people could learn to see buildings as more than profit margins. As midnight approached, I sat in Cameron's favorite chair holding the last letter my spouse had written, the one I read whenever doubt crept in. My dearest Morgan, if you're reading this, you've survived the storm and started rebuilding. I knew you would. You were always the stronger one, the one who could take our dreams and make them concrete reality. Don't mourn too long for what we've lost. Celebrate what you're creating. Every sustainable home, every community center, every park where children play. That's our love made manifest in steel and stone and growing things. Build the world we imagine together. I'll be watching from wherever architects go when their blueprints are complete. All my love, always, Cameron. Tomorrow ground would break on 3 new projects. Next week we would train 50 new architects in community-first design. Next month we would present plans for the first sustainable city in North America. The foundation that had risen from betrayal and grief had become something neither Cameron nor I had dared imagine, a global movement that proved profit and purpose could coexist, that buildings could heal communities rather than divide them. Alex's firm had collapsed, taking $47 million in imaginary profits with it. The Cameron Hayes Foundation had generated over $300 million in community value, housing families, educating children, caring for elderly, and proving that architecture could be revolution disguised as construction. As rain began falling outside, gentler than that funeral day 2 years ago, I whispered to the darkness, "We did it, Cameron. We built something that matters." And somewhere in the sound of rain on windows, in the whisper of wind through the blueprints on the desk, I could almost hear Cameron's reply. "No, my love, you did.